We got a great list of all of your initiatives that you have been doing. When can we expect corporate espionage, technology issues that are most important to the companies that have the most to lose when it comes to China?
Right. So as you see from the initiative itself, the initiative was started really in response to what we see as a persistent, concerted, very well-resourced and funded effort to take intellectual property from American companies, including companies right here in the San Francisco area, and transfer that intellectual property to China in what we call a sort of a rob, replicate, and replace approach to technological development. So you rob the intellectual property of an American company, you replicate the product in China, and then you replace the American company on the Chinese market first, and then if all goes well, on the global market. And that was what we were seeing in the intelligence and why we started this China initiative.
A lot of this has been done by the DOJ.
Right.
What are you doing that's new to help companies with the most to lose with China?
So what we're trying to do is a lot of outreach to companies and to show them the benefits of coming forward and telling us when they think some technology has been stolen early. Sometimes what may seem like an employee misbehaving is, in fact, somebody who's been co-opted by the Chinese intelligence services and is stealing on their behalf. So we don't want companies to just try to handle this on their own, because they need to understand that they're up against a nation state, right? And companies just don't have the resources and the knowledge that nation states do to combat that.
Do you feel like you have the knowledge and the staffing and the resources to take on a huge state?
Right. So a lot of what the China Initiative is about is really empowering and harnessing the U.S. attorneys' offices around the country, which is where most of our prosecutors are, really focusing their attention on this problem and letting them know from our main justice perspective, from the Attorney General's perspective, that this is a very important priority where they should be putting their resources in order to help companies tackle this problem.
What about future issues? A lot has been said about AI, robotics. Do you and the state attorneys, as you mentioned, have the resources to also now expand to all of those future issues?
I think that there are all different areas of technology, but the problem remains the same, right? The core problem of Chinese theft, whether what they're stealing is in the area of AI or robotics technology or biopharmaceuticals, et cetera, their tactics are all the same. And so if we're ready and we're empowered to reach out to companies to work with them on defending themselves, then I think that's technology agnostic, right? That will work regardless of what the Chinese are after. Now, we know what the Chinese are after because they've laid it out in their Made in China 2025 plan. And they're after basically 10 very large technological areas, everything from commercial airplane technology to new materials to biopharmaceuticals, on, that they think will be at the forefront, and they're probably right about this, of technology in this century.
What is the solution? Is it export bans, sanctions? What's the right solution to solve the problem?
There's no one solution, I think, and certainly our cases by themselves are not the silver bullet. The solution is working together with the private sector and government to watch out both for cyber intrusions, which is one tool, but also what we see increasingly in our cases is insider threats. So many of these cases, as the Chinese have shifted their resourcing to using their intelligence services to do this theft, a lot of these cases are now the result of insiders having been co-opted by the intelligence services and then sending information or stealing information and bringing it to China.
We've talked a lot about CFIUS, which we should say is the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. Do you expect to see more CFIUS involvement going forward?
Well, CFIUS was, of course, expanded just last year by Congress, looking at new technological areas, but also guarding against the theft of sensitive personal data, which has also been an issue of ours. The Chinese are very interested in personal data of government employees and others. You saw that as early as the Office of Personnel Management hacks, where everyone who had a security clearance, their data was stolen. And we see the Chinese continuing to be interested in personal data. It's of great value to them when they figure out how to target people. So the more that I know about you, for instance, the easier it will be for me to target you if I were an intelligence officer. I could pretend to have areas in common, et cetera, and then start to develop a relationship in that way.
We have to talk about Huawei. Is it a national security issue or part of the trade fights?
Well, I'm the national security guy, so for me, it's a national security issue. We have 2 cases going on against Huawei right now, one involving the theft of intellectual property, one involving a sanctions and bank fraud case, which is also a national security case. And then the broader concern on the national security side with Huawei is the influence of the Chinese government on Huawei and other large Chinese companies, and the use of the technology on the telecommunications network that we're all using every day for our everyday activities, and whether the Chinese government can then take advantage of the fact that Huawei is on American networks or on the networks of our allies around the world.
When you look at China, in the China initiative, what is your biggest concern? Is it cybersecurity? Is it IP theft? Is it Huawei? What is the biggest issue when it comes to China?
I think there's a variety of issues. My biggest concern is that they're using their intelligence services to target American companies the way that they've used them to target the government for years, and that American companies will find it very difficult to defend themselves against the intelligence services of one of the most sophisticated nations on the world.